Okay, good opponent. Now, let's go with the Sicilian. And c3 Sicilian by not a wrapper, c3 Sicilian. So we already know that there are two main responses to the c3 Sicilian. There's knight f6, but the move that, yeah, there's knight f6 and there's d5 striking in the center immediately. Let's go d5, striking in the center immediately. And now the battle begins to revolve around this d4 pawn. The question is, can black apply a significant amount of pressure on that d4 pawn? So how do we continue applying pressure on that d4 pawn? Like, what do we do? Yeah, knight c6, all very simple. I talked about this with Charlie today. And now bishop g4. Bishop comes out, applying indirect pressure to the pawn because we are pressuring the knight. And now we need to get these pieces out, so we go e6. And then we're going to go knight f6. I mean, this is all super normal stuff. Bishop drops back to h5. Okay, one sec. Okay. And now c4 by not a wrapper. Okay, so c4 attacks the queen. We have to move this queen back. Where should we move it? I mean, is there any particular reason to move it to one square as opposed to another square? Yeah, so the d7 square is pretty good. So if we go queen e4, first of all, then that walks right into knight c3. The good move, I think, is queen to d7, because at least we keep the queen deployed so it defends all these squares. But now we have to be very careful about what we do. If we take on d5, and then we move our knight away, white can leap into e5 with knight e5. White gets a very big initiative. So here, we must find a better square for the knight. But it seems that no better square exists because this knight covers the d4 square. But what can we do in order to guarantee that square for the knight? We can actually take on f3 first, intermediate move. Then this knight gets a very nice central square on d4. That's a key move, actually. Without it, without this move, black is already busted. I'm not sure if this is theory or maybe I did something wrong already. I mean, this looks reasonable for black. Let's see how he responds. Okay, knight c3. I mean, we need to keep developing our pieces. Knight f6. This is pretty standard. Bishop e3. Yeah, no, this guy's clearly incredibly strong. Okay, so he wants to take on d4. Can we support this knight somehow? Well, if we take the bishop, then we let his queen get open and our position becomes super cramped. So there's a move here which allows us, yes, e5 is correct, I think. e5 is a key move. And then you might notice this pawn and say, well, isn't this pawn a problem? Well, it is, but it's not as big of a problem as people might think it is because we can blockade it with our bishop. We can put our bishop on d6. This pawn is immobilized. And that pawn might have a counterpart on d4 should he take the knight. Now we can finally castle our king, and we don't have to worry about the king safety anymore. Let's see what not a wrapper plays here. Yeah, we're going to castle short. I mean, thank you, Min. Rating with a party of 51. Thank you so much, Min. Appreciate it. I'm doing just 1 or 2 games of the speedrun, and then I will wrap up myself because I am pretty exhausted. Thank you, Sullen Nader, for the prime. Okay, so now we can castle. Now we can castle, and let's see how white plays this position. Now, how can black play this position? What are our various plans? Well, we see that this is a pawn chain. And when we have a pawn chain, we need to start thinking about undermining the base of the pawn chain. So the move b5 comes to mind. It turns out that b5 is a blunder because remember, his bishop is making contact with the knight. And that knight is guarding b5. So if we play b5 immediately, then he's going to take the knight, and then he's going to take the pawn on b5. But I like the idea of preparing b5 by playing a6. I like that move quite a bit, actually. a6, preparing b5, attacking the base of the pawn chain. That's not necessarily what I would have played myself, but it's a perfectly sensible idea. There's several ways you can play this position with black. Attacking the base of the pawn chain is very thematic. It's what we discussed. Yeah, this is the reason why I was going to play h6, because now he's threatening to take on f6 and ruin our pawn structure in front of our king. That is unthinkable. What can we do about this? And this move that we're about to play is a move that a lot of people hesitate or really struggle to play because it's a retreating move. And I've sort of made this point throughout. You should never be afraid to make retreating moves because they are retreating moves. That should not be a reason to not play a move. The move is knight e8. If we play bishop e7, guys, we drop the pawn on e5. Be very careful. When you do make a retreating move, you need to think about which pawns or pieces or squares have been left behind. Are you leaving anything undefended, maybe? Got to be careful about that. Make sure that you're bearing that in mind. Knight e8 doesn't leave anything undefended. The knight wasn't defending anything. Knight e4. Okay. So that's a good move. But again, his activity here is not really as good as it appears. Again, we can make another retreating move, right? We don't want to give away this bishop. This bishop is like Atlas holding the world on its shoulders. So let's just drop the bishop to e7. And the secondary idea of this move, you guys see this knight on e8. Where can it eventually go? What is the ideal place for this knight? We've already discussed the notion that the knight is the best blockader. So this knight, the bishop clears out the parking space for the knight. And in order to put the knight on d6, we would first potentially maybe have to move the knight away from e4, although we don't really have to. We can play knight d6 immediately. And now we're in very good shape. This knight is, as they say in Russian, an eternal knight. That knight is completely unassailable. His bishop is biting on its own granite. And you could see that white's activity is purely illusory. Thank you, Wefcore, for the prime. Yeah, so g3. Now we have a very, well, let me think. Okay, so we have a pretty elementary way of getting rid of this knight. Who can tell me how can we do that? How can we get rid of the knight? Bingo. Yeah, good job. F5. The knight must move. The knight must move. And then we blockade on d6, and our position reaches epic purport. I mean, we have an ideal position in that case. And then we can start attacking on the king side because our pieces are perfectly placed, perfectly situated. And then we can start pressuring him in the center. We can bring more pieces into the game. It really depends on how white plays, but that looks absolutely horrible for white. Thank you for the prime, Alacius 2. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so d6 I saw. This is the last big obstacle that we have to surmount. And this is where, I mentioned this earlier, at this 2300 level, there are moments when the game literally just devolves into pure tactics. Pure tactics. And this is one of those moments. There's no inherent logic for why the correct move is the correct move. Does anybody see what the correct move is? We can win a piece here if black plays super precisely. So we don't play knight takes d6, then knight takes c5, and the game is unclear. Okay, I have to make a move. Knight takes f3, check. And after queen takes f3, we draw the queen onto a vulnerable square. And then, guys, everything is under control. Did you not see me play min? With full due respect, guys, I know what I'm doing. Queen takes f3, f takes c4, and we counterattack white's queen. So if he takes our queen and we take his queen with our rook, this line is not that hard to calculate. It's just a bit hard to see the move knight takes f3 because it's not very intuitive to give up the strong knight. But you remember that tactics transcends any kind of general considerations. When you can win a piece for no compensation, you want to do that over and above preserving a piece on a good square. I know, but people get nervous, and I don't want people to get nervous because, you know, I know it might seem annoying that I'm sort of waiting it out, but I know how much time I need to win a position like this. Okay, king h1. So again, we don't need to panic here. All we need to do is move our queen. We need to figure out where we want to put our queen such that we disallow any freak threats from him. And again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to play the move queen back to d8. If he takes our knight, then we take his knight, and the game is over. If he doesn't do that, then okay, that's an empty check. That doesn't do anything. And now we're attacking his rook. We're attacking his knight, and we're just going to take his rook. Now we're going to take his pawn, and that's it. We are up a rook in an endgame. I'm going to play a little bit fast here, just to yeah. So he resigns because the game is over. That was a nice game. I mean, that was only a 27 move game, but it was very rich. And thank you, Not a Rapper. It was very rich. Okay, so it was a C3 Sicilian. It was a C3 Sicilian. Oops, sorry, just checking. Okay, it was a c3 Sicilian, and we played the move d5, which is one of the two main lines. Does anybody remember what the other main line is? What is the other main line in this position? The other main line is, of course, knight to f6, yeah. Striking the pawn on e4. It's the same idea, right? We are trying to prevent white from going d4 uncontested. But here we decided on d5. Okay, so d4, knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4. E6 is normal, right? H3, bishop h5. I actually think bishop f5 might be a better move. I'm not exactly sure. And here he goes c4. Okay, so it's important here to choose the right square for the queen. If we go queen e4, the queen gets tangled up. White goes knight c3. This is out of the question. Why not take the knight after h3? So we talked about something pretty similar a while ago, which is that a lot of people would look at this position and say, wait a second, we can take the pawn, and now we can win a pawn. We can take the knight, and isn't that the whole point of what we're trying to do? But could somebody remind me what the flaw is in this reasoning? And if you guys remember, I showed you a game from my own chess career where I was able to exploit a similar idea. Bishop takes knight check. It's very simple. And now the queen is lost. So you want to be careful about putting all your eggs in one basket. This bishop is super valuable. You do not want to give white's bishop this monster diagonal, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's why we did this. So queen d7 is a very circumspect move. That queen is doing the most that it can be doing. And really one of the early critical moments occurs after d5. Why not d6? Well, that blocks the bishop. The main reason I didn't want to put the queen here is because later I thought maybe I can develop the bishop somewhere. I didn't want to commit to e7. Okay, Jerry Baum, thank you for the 2 months. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So d5, this is the critical moment. And the reality is, black is in trouble if we don't have this move. This is the only move, actually, that I believe that doesn't lose the game. Because let's assume that knight d8, for example, is played. If you just look at black's position, I mean, white can just pile up in many different ways. So, for example, g4. And the idea of g4 is to free up one of white's other pieces. Could somebody now tell me, how do you nurture the initiative? This is a very natural move, centralizing one of white's pieces. And this wins the game. Never more or less, thank you for the prime, knight e5. This forces the queen to, let's say, c7. And now another devastating shot all across the board. Fireworks are happening, and white is having all of the fun. Well, bishop f4 is good, but you can make another move first. You can give a check on a4. And just look at this. Black cannot cover this check at all. You have to move the king, bishop f4, discovery, the game is over. It's like plus 10 according to the computer. So, for example, queen b6, checkmate on g5. That's one option. So, you guys can see how bad this can become. And so, you need to identify these kinds of moments in the game. You need to identify moments when you feel like, okay, I need to find an only move. I need to find an accurate move in order not to lose. And then you need to hunker down, really hunker down, and just search for it. Be stubborn. And here, I was stubborn in the sense that I don't want to move my knight to d8. I want my knight on d4. How can I get it there? Well, the knight on f3 is preventing the move knight d4 from being a thing, because black loses actually just a piece. Not even a pawn, but a piece, because the bishop on h5 is now lost. Does that make sense? If you take on e2, then knight takes e2. And so we can't forget about our bishop on h5. We take the knight, and we guarantee ourselves this very nice outpost. The position becomes highly unclear. Okay, so knight c3. Are there telltale signs? Well, largely it's instinctive, but there are telltale signs. I mean, look at the position just visually, right? It looks like white's developing a big initiative. I mean, he's tempo, tempo, tempo. Our king is in the center. Those are the telltale signs. It just appears that if I'm not careful, I might just get blown off the board. That's largely an instinctive thing, but it is an instinctive thing because there are telltale signs. So that's one way of identifying critical moments. Just like things feel very wrong. It feels like things are about to go very wrong, particularly in relation to your king. I can't give you guys anything more specific because there are no formulaic sort of methods of determining a critical moment, and that's why you train, right? Kelma, CM, thank you for the tier 1. Okay, Whoops, sorry, did not mean to do that. Bishop takes f3, knight d4. Now we, of course, develop our knight. And now bishop e3, we cement the knight with e5. This is another very important move. Very important move. Now, does it make sense to you guys why we don't want to take the bishop? Why didn't he trade off? Yeah, I'll explain that in a second. So we don't take the bishop because this knight is our strongest piece. The knight is like, what would I compare it to? Let me think of a good analogy. Give me a second, guys. Actually, let me grab some water. And as I'm grabbing water, I'm going to think of the best analogy to describe the situation. Hashtag dedicated teacher. Just kidding. 1 second. So I came up with the idea of a dam. You know, like an Aswan High Dam in Egypt or the Hoover Dam. This knight is like the dam. If the knight is gone, the water floods your position. White gets all of these pieces in, and as they say in Russian, you won't even be able to collect your bones at the end. That's how badly you'll get demolished. So the knight is like the, the keeper of the position. It keeps us away from a big flood, and so we have to protect the knight with e5. Sorry for the violent comparison, but hey, now you guys will remember. Okay, so castles. You can also say in Russian a slightly less violent expression. It literally translates to "you will not carry away your legs," which basically means, it basically means you will not be able to escape, right? You won't carry away your legs. But it's meant in a very emphatic sense, like even your legs will not be able to carry you to safety. Like you're basically busted. Okay, so e5, right? Now, some people, there are plenty of less violent expressions, but there's also plenty of violent ones. A lot of people were asking why bishop takes d4 was not played, and this was possible. And which way do you guys think I would have taken on d4? Not an obvious question, by the way. Which pawn should we take on d4 with, and what is the reason for that? Let's see what people think. So we have people on both sides of the aisle here, which is always good. Whoops, sorry. I did not mean to do that. Okay, so the correct move, in my opinion, is actually c takes. Let's debate. Why do people want to take with the e-pawn? What's the rationale behind this? C takes d5 allows the passed pawn to advance. Keeps the king safer. Chimpanzee, are you behind c takes d4 or e takes d4? C. Okay, so there is a specific reason why I think this move is good. And the specific reason involves this little piece over here. Okay? The diagonal for the bishop is opened up. So when the knight moves, hey, this is a super nasty check. The king has to move. And now we are the ones who castle, so the table's turned. White's king is the one which is in danger, and white has no way to stop bishop e4. So this will force white's king into a relatively precarious position. But you should also think about it this way. E takes d4 opens up that e-file. Now, who is the e-file likely to benefit? Well, it's likely to benefit the side that is the first to castle, because the side that is the first to castle is going to be the side that first is able mathematically to put a rook on e1, and the side that is faster to castle is, of course, white, because white is now ready to castle. In the next move, black still needs to develop a bishop. Does that make sense? So e takes d4, I think, is fine. It's not a huge deal, but for the higher rateds among you, nuances like these are what decide games. So this shouldn't be sneezed at. Okay, why is getting a rook on the file first? Well, because you control the open file. Controlling open files is good. Yeah, castling long would be too dangerous, though. If you castle long here, just if you look at where my cursor is around black's king, white can go b4, and he can blast open the king position. It will take black a lot longer to do the same thing to white's king, because white has significantly less weaknesses on the king's side. Okay. So, yeah, e5 would have also been possible, by the way. So, bishop d6, developing the bishop, blockading the pawn. Rook e1 castles. a3. And here I would have considered h6, by the way, to prevent bishop g5, but we played a6 to prepare b5. Bishop g5, and now knight e8. Knight e8 drops the knight back. Remember, don't be afraid to make retreating moves. And another reason this move is good is because it opens up the path for the f-pawn. So this idea of going f5, e4 comes to mind. We actually won the game with this idea. Knight e4, dropping the bishop back to e7, basically kind of regrouping our pieces. The knight from f6 maneuvers over to d6, and the bishop drops back to e7 in order to lighten the load by effectuating a trade. Okay, so bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, already white is worse. This is probably a mistake. I think that Naroditsky should have maybe retreated back to e3 and kept the pieces on the board, because very quickly I'm able to just wipe white's pieces off of the board. Why couldn't white play b4 to attack your pawn chain? In which position? Well, maybe he could have. Maybe he actually should have played b4. Yeah, b4 might have been possible, because after cb, ab, bishop takes b4, you can play bishop takes d4, and material equality has been restored. White gets a slightly more free position. Although here black is still fine. Rook a c8 to attack the pawn on c4. Why drop the bishop back when knight takes d6, knight takes d6 makes your knight a blockader? Anyway, that's a good question. So why are we making this move if I just claimed that the knight is the best blockader? Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? First of all, I want to eliminate white's dark squared bishop specifically. And the reason why is that, let's say you make the move b5. First of all, notice that the e5 pawn is hanging, although it may be possible to respond with the move f6, forking the rook and the bishop. I actually didn't see that. This is calculating pretty far, so no, it would have been possible to go b5, but I thought that this bishop is a bit of a loose cannon, and so I figured if I'm already going to give up the bishop, I might as well take out an important piece with it. Thank you, I'm a black belt, for the prime. f5 chasing away the knight, and this move works only because of the tactic that ensued in the game. Now, if the knight moves away, then we go knight d6, and then we go e4, and then we can prepare f4, and we have just an amazing position here. All of our pieces are in the game after rook a to e8, so this is just crushing. So d6, right? And this is less mysterious than it appears. The point is that you try to open up the position, and after knight takes d6, the knight no longer has the d5 pawn kind of as an umbrella. I call that pawn an umbrella pawn. Without that umbrella pawn, that bishop can actually slam itself into d5. The position becomes super unclear here. Okay? And knight takes f3 check is what wins a piece. Knight takes f3. He plays king h1. Now, if queen takes f3, who can remind me of black's move? Who can remind me of black's move? And why does it work? F takes e4. F takes e4, and we counterattack the queen. But the important part is that we attack the queen with a rook. If we take the queen with a pawn, then we drop the rook on f8. It's crucial that in taking with the f-pawn, our rook actually makes contact with the queen. And if white tries to desperado sacrifice his queen, then we take the queen with our queen. So none of it works. White is going to be down a piece. So in the game, he played king h1, trying to trick me, but now we just drop our queen back, and you know, this is all a paper tiger. It's water under the bridge because, whoops, sorry, keep pressing the wrong button, because we're just up a rook and there's nothing to be afraid of. Remember that when you're up this much material, you can basically give up some of that material. I made this point as early as game 1 of the speedrun. Like, that's one of the most fundamental principles of converting an advantage. When you've got a lot of extra material, you can give some of it away in order to simplify your task. Do not be afraid to, don't take that too far, but do not be afraid to sacrifice a pawn or two in order to clear the cobwebs. So nothing like insane in this game, right? Nothing that I did was like out of the realm of the ordinary. It was certainly a very interesting game. It was an interesting opening. The critical moment was really here, right? We set the tone by putting the knight on d4. That knight on d4 won us the game in the end. Okay, any questions?